Step into your greatness, let it shine oh so bright. I am worthy VIP, gonna take you to new heights. Turn the volume up, let's ignite your soul's delight. Join the journey now, everything gonna be alright. Hey, hey, you know you're worthy all day.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're taking a really focused look at daring leadership.
Yeah, and what it takes to build a culture of courage in, our workplaces.
And we're using Brene Brown as our guide here, pulling insights from her book, Dare to Lead. The subtitle is Brave Work, Tough Conversations, Whole Hearts.
Exactly. And our mission for this deep dive really is to pull out the practical stuff, the actionable bits from her work that can help you become a more daring leader.
So figuring out the key skills.
Right. And also looking at the ways we kind of armor up the things that get in the way of leading with courage.
Okay, so Brown starts the book with this story. And I think it's pretty relatable, that feeling of being maybe a bit out of your depth.
Oh, you mean the conference thing?
Yeah. She thought it was for C-level people, like her crowd.
And it turned out to be C-level executives? Oops.
Right. You can just feel that moment of panic, like, oh, am I supposed to be here?
Totally.
Yeah.
And that feeling that, initial overwhelm, it's such a human starting point for this whole conversation she wants to have.
It really is.
And it's interesting, too. Her husband, Steve, told her, don't use all that business jargon.
Oh, yeah. Like no synergies.
Exactly. No blue sky thinking. Just talk straight. Which is kind of her whole approach, isn't it?
It really is. And apparently that whole experience, it was a real catalyst for her.
How so?
Well, it made her realize how important it was to connect these big ideas, courage, connection, meaning with the actual world of work.
Which can feel sometimes pretty disconnected from that stuff. Very transactional.
Totally. Focused on just the bottom line.
And what's important to understand is this wasn't just like a sudden idea she had.
Right. There's research behind a lot of it.
Yeah, like 2 decades of research. The book draws on tons of interviews, plus a new study with 150 leaders globally.
C-level and C-level, as she says.
Right, and program evaluations, and even a 3-year project just focused on developing ways to, measure daring leadership.
So it's really grounded, not just inspirational fluff.
Definitely not. It's backed by data.
And her aim with the book, then, is pretty clear. A practical guide.
Yeah, a practical kind of no BS guide to actually being a more daring leader.
She wants it to change how you think, sure, but also how you actually behave, real changes.
Which is why it resonates, I think.
Yeah.
And, whether you've read her other stuff like Daring Greatly or Rising Strong, this deep dive should still give you something new, especially focused on leadership.
And if you're new to Brene Brown.
We'll cover the basics you need. We're really looking at it through that professional lens.
Yeah.
Leadership at work. So there'll be different examples, a specific focus.
Okay, so after all that work, all that research,
Yeah.
What's the main finding? What is daring leadership?
Well, the really good news is that courage isn't some, fixed trait. You're not just born courageous or not.
Okay.
Her research shows it's actually 4 skill sets. Things that can be taught, learned, practiced, even measured.
4 skills, what are they?
Okay, so they are rumbling with vulnerability.
Rumbling. Interesting word.
Yeah. Then living into our values, braving trust, and learning to rise.
Rumbling with vulnerability, living into values, braving trust, learning to rise. Got it. So where do you start?
She's super clear on this. The foundation, the absolute starting point for all the others is rumbling with vulnerability.
Everything else builds on that.
Pretty much. She says our capacity to be daring leaders can never be greater than our capacity for vulnerability. It's like the prerequisite.
Wow. Okay, that cuts against the grain, doesn't it? The
Yeah.
typical image of a leader.
Oh, completely. The leader who's always strong, always has the answers, never shows weakness.
Yeah, invincibility. This sounds like the opposite.
It really challenges that old model.
Yeah.
And she shares this story about an older leader, like late 50s, who heard about these skills and basically said, wait, these are the things I was taught growing up.
Ah, so they're not just like new management fads.
Exactly. They're fundamental life skills,
Yeah.
things we might need to relearn or just, remember.
Okay, that makes sense. So this brings us to another idea. She talks about the physics of vulnerability. What's that about?
It's actually pretty simple, but profound, basically. If you're brave enough, often enough, you will fall, you'll stumble.
Failure is part of the deal.
It's inevitable if you're really putting yourself out there. Daring means being all in, even knowing things might go wrong.
So brave people aren't the ones who never fail?
Nope. Brave people know disappointment. They know failure. They know heartbreak. It comes with the territory of daring.
So, okay, help me understand vulnerability better then. It's not weakness. It's not inviting failure.
Not at all. She defines vulnerability as that feeling, that emotion we get in times of uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure.
Uncertainty, risk, emotional exposure. Okay.
It's not about winning or losing. It's just about showing up when you can't control the outcome.
Like giving that risky presentation.
Exactly. Or having that really tough conversation with someone on your team.
Or navigating big changes in the organization.
All of those. They're packed with uncertainty, potential risk, and definitely emotional exposure. That's vulnerability.
Okay, that really resonates. We all face those moments where we just have to act without knowing exactly how it'll turn out. But how do we actually start rumbling with it? It still sounds kind of scary.
Well, she offers a really practical first step, something called the Square Squad exercise.
Square squad, like a little team.
Sort of. It's about thinking really small.
Yeah.
Identify just a few people whose names could literally fit on a 1-inch square piece of paper, whose opinions of you actually matter.
Just a tiny few, not everyone.
Right. Whose feedback you genuinely trust. And then, she suggests, maybe reach out to them. Thank them for being straight with you, for their support.
So it's about focusing your attention.
Exactly. And it connects to how trust is built, not in huge gestures, but tiny moments. The marbles in the jar. Focus on those you trust, whose opinions count.
Okay, that feels way less overwhelming than trying to please everyone or be vulnerable with everyone.
Right. It narrows the focus to what's manageable and meaningful.
Yeah.
Helps tune out the noise.
So let's talk about myths. There must be common misconceptions about vulnerability, right?
Oh, definitely. Big ones.
Like what?
Well, the biggest one is probably that you can be courageous without being vulnerable.
Ah, the strong leader myth again.
Exactly. But her research and just, lived experience across so many fields shows it's impossible. Courage requires facing uncertainty, which is vulnerability.
Okay. What else? What about people who say, oh, I just don't do vulnerability, not my style?
Yeah, she tackles that head on. She basically says, look, vulnerability isn't optional. Life is uncertain, risky, emotionally exposing.
You can't avoid it.
Nope. The only choice you have is how you engage with it. Do you lean in consciously, or do you let fear drive your reactions?
Like shutting down or getting defensive.
Or blaming others, yeah. All those less effective behaviors often come from trying to avoid feeling vulnerable. Ignoring it doesn't work. You just navigate it unconsciously, usually badly.
That makes a lot of sense. It's about acknowledging reality.
Exactly. And she's careful to make a distinction here. When she talks about vulnerability in leadership, she means relational vulnerability, how we show up with each other, being open, authentic in interactions.
Not like systemic issues.
Right. She uses this story about a rocket scientist who said he couldn't be vulnerable because, stuff could fall out of the sky. That's systemic risk. Important, but different. The focus here is person to person, leader to team.
Got it. So developing these skills, starting with vulnerability, it's not just about being nice. It has real leadership value.
Absolutely. She argues these skills build uniquely human capabilities, empathy, connection, trust.
The things machines can't do.
Precisely. Which makes them more valuable in leadership today, not less.
Okay, another thing I've heard, people say you need trust before you can be vulnerable. It feels like a catch-22.
Yeah, the chicken and egg problem.
Right. Which comes first?
Her research suggests it's actually mutual. It goes both ways. You need some trust to risk vulnerability.
Makes sense.
But you also build deeper trust through being vulnerable. They kind of grow together, step by step.
Incrementally.
Yeah, it's not all or nothing.
So how does that trust get built, especially at work? Is it big team-building events, grand gestures?
Rarely, actually. She uses this wonderful metaphor, the marble jar.
Marble jar. Tell me more.
Imagine trust is like an empty jar. Every time someone does something small that shows they care, they're listening, they're reliable, they earn a marble in your jar.
Ah, small, consistent acts.
Exactly. Paying attention, remembering details, following through, showing genuine care. It's the buildup of those tiny marble moments, not usually the big dramatic stuff. She tells a story about her daughter, Ellen, learning this with friends.
I love that. It makes trust feel much more tangible, something you build day by day.
It really does.
Yeah.
It highlights how much those everyday interactions matter.
What about when vulnerability goes wrong? Like when people overshare or it feels manipulative.
Right. Fake vulnerability. Brown is really clear about this.
It's not real vulnerability.
No. Oversharing. Or using vulnerability to get something from someone that actually destroys trust. It's ineffective.
So how do you do it right?
It requires clear intention,
Hmm.
knowing why you're sharing, understanding the context, and critically having boundaries.
Boundaries. That seems key. How does she talk about those?
She uses a definition from her friend Kelly Ray Roberts, which is basically, boundaries are simply figuring out what's okay and what's not okay.
For you, in your interactions.
Yeah, and being clear about that. Vulnerability without boundaries isn't really vulnerability. It can become TMI or manipulation or just messy.
You need the container of boundaries for vulnerability to be healthy.
That's a great way to put it. You mentioned a cautionary tale earlier, a young CEO.
Oh yeah, what was that about?
So this CEO got really excited about vulnerability after learning about Brown's work. Like super enthusiastic.
Ready to dive in.
Totally. Wanted to get really vulnerable with his team right away. But he hadn't quite grasped the boundaries part. Yeah. He didn't stop to think about the why, the how, the with whom. Brown was concerned that this unfiltered vulnerability could actually scare off investors or destabilize things.
Because it wasn't thoughtful or appropriate for his role.
Exactly. It underscores that vulnerability in leadership isn't just letting it all hang out. It needs to be considered, intentional, appropriate.
Okay. Wow. So we've really just scratched the surface here, but we've covered a lot on this first skill, rumbling with vulnerability.
We really have. We've talked about courage being skills, vulnerability being the foundation.
Addressed some myths.
Talked about trust, the marble jar, the importance of boundaries, and avoiding that fake stuff. It's a lot to take in.
Definitely. So thinking ahead, what can listeners expect as we continue this deep dive?
Well, next we'll get into the other 3 skill sets, living into our values,
Okay.
braving trust,
Yeah.
and we'll dig into her braving acronym for what makes up trust.
Oh, interesting.
And then learning to rise, which is all about resilience after setbacks. Plus, we'll explore that leadership armor she talks about.
Things like perfectionism.
Yeah, perfectionism, scarcity, numbing, cynicism, needing to be right, all that stuff that gets in the way.
Seems like really valuable territory. So for you listening right now, what's maybe one thing to think about or try before the next deep dive?
I think that Square Squad idea is a great starting point. Just take a minute, maybe later today, and think, who are those few people whose opinions truly matter to you?
Identify your squad.
Yeah. And then maybe look for one small, really small opportunity in the next day or two to practice a tiny bit of relational vulnerability.
Like what?
Maybe just sharing how you're actually feeling about something work-related instead of the usual fine. Or asking for honest feedback from someone in that Square Squad. Just a small step.
That feels doable. Concrete. Okay, so to wrap up for today, this idea that our ability to lead daringly is directly tied to our willingness to be vulnerable.
It's powerful, isn't it?
It really is. So the question for you to ponder is, what could become possible for you in your leadership if you leaned into that discomfort just a bit more? If you showed up with your whole heart?
Something to think about. And if you want to explore more before we dive deeper next time, Brene Brown's website is a great resource.
Definitely. Well, thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.
Step into your greatness, let it shine oh so bright. I am worthy VIP, gonna take you to new heights. Turn the volume up, let's ignite your soul's delight. Join the journey now, everything gonna be alright. Hey, hey, you know you're worthy all day. Stand tall, feel the love come your way. VIP every single day. Let's celebrate, it's your time to sway. Unlock your power, let your spirit take flight. I am worthy VIP, beaming light into the night. Feel the magic spark, it's a beautiful sight. Here to cheer you on, life shining a new light. Hey, hey, you know you're worthy.